the words of Martin Luther King Jr., "We are not makers of history, we are made by history." And so it was with King himself. Born on a chilly January day in 1929, in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, young Martin was introduced to a world divided by color lines. Raised in a devoutly religious family, his father, Martin Luther King Sr., was not just a Baptist preacher but also a prominent civil rights leader. It was from him that King Jr. inherited his first lessons of equality and justice. The dinner table discussions often revolved around biblical teachings, social injustices, and the urgent need for change. This environment sowed the seeds of activism in him, shaping his perspectives and future endeavors. King's early education was a journey through a racially segregated system. He attended the segregated public schools in Georgia, graduating from high school at the tender age of 15. The harsh realities of segregation were a daily reminder of the inequality deeply rooted in society. The racial divide he experienced was not just confined to the streets, it found its way into classrooms, parks, and public transportation. This early exposure to racial discrimination sparked a flame in young Martin, fueling his desire to bring about change. His intellectual curiosity and hunger for knowledge led him to Morehouse College, where he studied sociology. It was during these formative years that King was introduced to the writings of Henry David Thoreau, particularly his essay on civil disobedience. Thoreau's ideas of peaceful protest and nonviolent resistance resonated deeply with King, profoundly influencing his ideas on civil rights activism. On this journey through his childhood and early influences, we see how the threads of King's early life experiences, his education, and his religious upbringing were intricately woven together, shaping the man he would become. His life was a testament to his belief that we are made by history. Young Martin was not born a leader, but the circumstances of his upbringing and the influences around him were crafting a history maker. Education and spiritual development were the cornerstones of King's early life. His journey, from the halls of Morehouse College to the classrooms of Boston University, was one of enlightenment and growth. It was at Morehouse College where King first encountered the harsh reality of racial segregation. This experience ignited a flame within him, fueling his resolve to fight against racial injustice. Next, he moved on to Crozer Theological Seminary. It was here that King began to explore the power of speech and the art of leadership. He learned to leverage his voice as a tool for change, a weapon against inequality. His time at Crozer not only honed his public speaking skills, but also deepened his understanding of the social and political complexities of racial discrimination. King's journey of education was not limited to the United States. He ventured to Boston University for his doctoral studies, where he immersed himself in philosophical and theological discourses. It was here that King discovered the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. The philosophy of nonviolent resistance resonated with King, who saw in it a practical and moral solution to the struggle for civil rights. King's education was not merely an intellectual pursuit. It was a spiritual journey that shaped his worldview, his values, and his approach to activism. His studies in theology and philosophy imbued him with a profound understanding of the inherent dignity and worth of all individuals, regardless of their race or social status. The seeds of his dream for a just and equitable society were sown during these formative years. From college student to doctorate holder, King's education was about more than just academics. It was a journey that shaped his ideology and his destiny. His vision for a world free of racial discrimination was not born in a vacuum. It was nurtured and refined through years of rigorous study and deep introspection. His education and spiritual formation were the crucibles in which his dream was forged, shaping him into the leader we remember today. Dr. King once said, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle." A perfect reflection of his commitment to community organizing and workers' rights. In the bustling neighborhoods of Montgomery, Alabama, and the streets of Chicago, King's voice echoed, advocating for housing rights, education, and economic equality. He believed firmly in the power of communities and the importance of their role in shaping society. King's work as a community organizer was not merely about sparking change, but about empowering individuals to become agents of change themselves. In addition to his civil rights advocacy, King was a staunch supporter of the labor movement. He understood the intricate bond between racial and economic justice. To him, the fight against racial segregation was inherently tied to a fight for economic justice, a fight for a fair wage, a fight for dignified working conditions. One of the most striking examples of King's support for labor rights was his involvement in the Memphis sanitation workers' strike in 1968. Over 1,000 black sanitation workers took to the streets, demanding better pay, safer working conditions, and recognition of their union. Their protest signs, reading "I am a man," were a poignant reminder of their struggle for dignity in a world that often overlooked them. King did not hesitate to stand with these workers. He saw their struggle as a reflection of the larger issues that plagued America: racial discrimination, economic inequality, and the devaluation of human labor. He rallied with them, marched with them, and spoke for them. In one of his speeches, King proclaimed, "All labor has dignity." He argued that no job was insignificant, no worker was unimportant. Every person, regardless of the nature of their work, deserved respect and fair treatment. This advocacy for workers' rights was not an isolated incident. Throughout his life, King supported numerous labor strikes and campaigns. He believed in the power of collective action, in the strength of unity. He saw the labor movement as a critical ally in the fight for civil rights and social justice. King's work in community organizing and his advocacy for workers' rights may not be as widely recognized as his civil rights activism. However, these efforts were integral to his vision of a just and equitable society. They reflected his belief in the interconnectedness of all forms of injustice, his commitment to uplift every individual, and his dream of a world where dignity and respect were not privileges, but rights. King's fight was not just against racial segregation, it was a fight for economic justice and a fight for dignity for every worker. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. This profound statement was one of the guiding principles behind Martin Luther King Jr.'s opposition to the Vietnam War, an aspect of his activism that was controversial, yet significant. King's stance against the war was far from popular at the time. The Vietnam War was seen by many as a necessary fight against communism, and those who opposed it were often marginalized. But King, ever the advocate for justice and peace, saw things differently. He saw a war that was taking the lives of thousands, a war that was draining resources from social programs at home, and a war that was disproportionately affecting the poor and people of color. In his speeches, King did not merely condemn the war. He called for a fundamental shift in America's values and priorities. In his famous Beyond Vietnam speech delivered at Riverside Church in New York City in April of 1967, he stated, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." King believed that violence and injustice anywhere were a threat to justice everywhere. He saw a direct link between the struggle for civil rights at home and the fight for peace abroad. He argued that the same forces that perpetuated segregation and discrimination in the United States were also driving the war in Vietnam. King's opposition to the Vietnam War further cemented his legacy as a champion of non-violence and justice. Despite facing criticism and even threats to his life, he stood firm in his convictions, demonstrating the courage and integrity that would inspire generations to come. King's voice against the Vietnam War was a voice for peace, a voice for justice, and a voice for the voiceless. His words and actions continue to resonate today, reminding us of the interconnectedness of all struggles for justice and the enduring power of nonviolent resistance. King's influence was not confined to the borders of the United States. His message of equality and nonviolence echoed across continents, inspiring activists and social movements far beyond his homeland. In the stormy 60s, when King was leading the civil rights movement, the world was also witnessing revolutions of its own. Many countries were grappling with their own fights for freedom, equality, and justice. King's principles of peaceful protest and civil disobedience became a beacon of hope for these global movements. In South Africa, for instance, his philosophy deeply influenced those battling against the inhumanities of apartheid. Leaders like Nelson Mandela found resonance in King's message of peaceful resistance, which played a significant role in the eventual demise of apartheid. Across the Atlantic, in the United Kingdom, King's influence was palpable in the fight against racial discrimination. His speeches inspired British activists to address the systemic racism prevalent in their society. His philosophy of nonviolent protest was seen in action during the Bristol bus boycotts in the early 60s. Similarly, in India, King's teachings found a fertile ground in a country that itself was a birthplace of non-violent resistance. His ideas were instrumental in shaping India's post-colonial journey and continued to inspire activists fighting for social justice in the country today. But the influence of King was not just limited to these nations. His ideas transcended geographical boundaries, inspiring individuals and movements in countless other countries. From Australia to Zimbabwe, King's principles have been adopted and adapted, fueling the fight for justice and equality globally. And this influence hasn't waned with time. Even today, over half a century after his untimely demise, King's ideas continue to inspire social justice movements around the world. Whether it's the fight for racial equality, gender rights, or climate justice, King's teachings of peaceful resistance, equality, and justice remain relevant. They have found a new lease of life in the digital age, where his speeches and writings are widely shared, reaching millions who might not have been familiar with his work otherwise. His words continue to spur people into action, reminding them of the power of peaceful protest and the importance of standing up for what's right. In the end, King's legacy is not just about the civil rights movement or his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. His legacy is about the enduring influence of his ideas, the countless lives he has touched, and the change he has inspired across the globe. King's legacy is a testament to the enduring power of his ideals. His dream of equality, justice, and peace continues to inspire change around the world. In the end, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. As we journey through the multifaceted legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., it's clear that his contributions extended far beyond his more commonly known civil rights activism. His life was a testament to a deep and unwavering commitment to justice, manifested in his work as a community organizer, his advocacy for workers' rights, and his staunch opposition to the Vietnam War. We've delved into the early influences that shaped King's values and beliefs, exploring how his upbringing and education laid the groundwork for his profound impact on society. His commitment to community organizing, addressing issues such as housing, education, and poverty in marginalized communities, is a testament to his dedication to the upliftment of all. In the realm of workers' rights, King's voice resonated in campaigns to improve working conditions and wages for laborers. His belief in the dignity of all work and the rights of every worker remains a beacon of inspiration for labor movements today. King's powerful speeches against the Vietnam War revealed his deep-seated conviction for peace and justice. His courage in voicing opposition, despite public and political pushback, is a stark reminder of the cost of standing up for one's beliefs. His influence wasn't confined to the borders of the United States. King's principles and ideas have reverberated across the globe, inspiring activists and influencing movements for civil rights and social justice. His legacy continues to inspire change, not just within the realm of civil rights, but in the broader fight for justice and equality. As we reflect on the life and work of Martin Luther King Jr., it's essential to acknowledge the breadth of his contributions. He was more than a civil rights leader. He was a champion for the disenfranchised, a voice for the voiceless, and an advocate for justice in all its forms. His life's work serves as a reminder of the power of conviction, the importance of action, and the enduring impact of standing up for what's right. In looking back, we also look forward. We're reminded of the work that still needs to be done, the inequalities that persist, and the injustices that continue. Yet, in the face of these challenges, we're inspired by King's legacy to continue striving for a world that embodies the principles he held dear. His words, actions, and ideas serve as a guide for our collective journey towards justice and equality. As we navigate the complexities of our world, let's remember the lessons of Martin Luther King Jr. and let his legacy inspire us to action. As we continue to strive for justice and equality, let us remember the words and actions of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and let his legacy inspire us to be the change we wish to see.